Greetings and welcome to the University of Minnesota Alumni Association's webinar series. My name is John Ruzek and I'm the Senior Director of Alumni Networks and your host today. Thanks to all the alumni and friends who have made time to join us live. We're going to have a really fun webinar panel discussion today on some things with the job search process, and have a great panel of four area recruiters that will share some of their insights and expertise. But before we do that, just a couple of notes. Today's webinar is part of an ongoing free series being offered by the University of Minnesota Alumni Association, where we're having conversations with experts about career, life, and learning topics. And we've had thousands of alumni and friends attend live during these webinars over the past 2.5 years, and nearly over 15,000 YouTube views as well. And initiatives like these are made part and possible by our Alumni Association members. So thank you so much. Because of our members, we can create powerful opportunities for students, alumni, and the alumni that really total more than 466,000 alumni and friends worldwide. And if you're interested in learning more about us, visit us at umnalumni.org/membership. We have 3 upcoming webinars between now and May. On April 20th, Kelly McClellan of the Carlson School of Management Graduate Business Career Office will be talking about creating a meaningful career. April 27th, our Alumni Association vendor Credible will be talking about student debt management and refinancing. And on May 24th, we have a couple U of M faculty talking about the important research that's shaping early autism identification and intervention. And you can learn all about those at umnalumni.org/virtual. Some technical housekeeping items. You have joined the presentation today listening using your computer speaker system by default. If you would prefer to listen over the telephone, just select telephone in the audio pane of your GoToWebinar panel, and dial-in information will be displayed. If you experience audio difficulties while listening via your computer speakers, you might have too many applications open and or listening off of a wireless signal. So feel free to close any unnecessary applications or move over to a hardwired signal. Today, we definitely want your questions because this is a free-flowing, informal conversation. So along the way, we want to hear from you. So when you have a question, type it into the questions pane on your GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll monitor them along the way, and hopefully get to as many questions that we can, because we want this to be an engaging conversation and try to address the things that our audience is interested in. So today's webinar is job search tips from recruiters, and I'm going to jump right into introductions of our distinguished panel, starting first with Megan Herrmann, who is a supply chain recruiter for General Mills here in the Twin Cities. She was recently promoted into a position which recruits for the operations, logistics, engineering, sourcing, and information technology and quality functions. And she is a graduate of Evangel University in Springfield, Missouri. Megan, welcome. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and your role there, and anything else about General Mills.
Thank you. Well, happy to be attending and a panelist today. Like John had said, I work for General Mills. I've just moved into a role supporting supply chain, and previously had helped recruit for more of our marketing and global consumer insights functions. I've also helped support some of our corporate functions, so finance, information technology, HR from a campus perspective. So have helped with both intern and full-time hires coming right off of campus, as well as more experienced hires, which I'm doing right now. I've been with General Mills for 6 years and have been in recruiting for 4 of those years. So as you guys know, General Mills is a food manufacturing company. We have food products marketed in over more than 100 countries on 6 continents, and we just celebrated our 150th year anniversary this year. So have really enjoyed a long journey to where we are today, and have acquired some new brands that you might be seeing around, like Annie's, Food Should Taste Good, and Epic Meat Bars. So really excited to be here today and answer some of your questions and help you learn a little bit more about what's behind the veil of recruiters.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Megan, for being here. And also there's a great U of M Alumni Network that just got kicked off there at General Mills this past fall, and continuing to look forward to continued engagement with the alumni out at corporate headquarters as well. Moving to another company that actually has a U of M alumni network is BestBuy, and representing BestBuy here today is Ann Naughton, who's a recruiter in finance and accounting, and is also an alumna from the Carlson School with her MBA. And actually, our next two folks that I'll introduce are here in the room with me today. So welcome, Ann.
Hi, John. Great to be here.
So just tell us a little bit more about yourself and BestBuy.
Yeah, so I've been with BestBuy for the last 3 years, specifically in the talent acquisition arena. I started as a sourcer, so what that means is going specifically after passive talent who aren't kind of actively in the job market, which has been an increasingly growing area within talent acquisition. So I did that for a year, and then the last 2 years I've been kind of doing full cycle recruiting, supporting specifically the finance and accounting capability, which includes tax, internal audit, treasury, finance shared services, essentially kind of every group that falls under our CFO.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for being here.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
All right. Our next distinguished panelist is Elizabeth Nelson, who's the director of strategic talent, who's the director for the strategic talent acquisition team for the Minnesota Department of Human Services, which is the state's largest agency with over 6,000 employees dedicated to providing services for over 1 million Minnesotans, 87 counties, and 11 tribes. And Elizabeth holds a bachelor's degree in psychology and neuroscience from the University of Minnesota. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you, John. I'm happy to be here.
So just tell us a little bit more about your recruiting role with Department of Human Services, and anything else you'd like the audience to know?
Sure. So I lead our strategic talent acquisition team, which is a group of 20 professionals looking to fill positions across all of our agency. We have positions throughout Minnesota, as John had mentioned, and we fill about 600 positions a year, from direct care and support, so individuals who are working directly with adolescents, youth, other individuals with mental illness or mental health concerns, all the way to our geriatric patients across the state. We also have a number of positions. About a third of our staff work in operations, policy, legislative, marketing, communications, HR, finance, and so forth. So we have a very diverse group of people that are working with us, and we're looking to always bring in staff in a variety of areas, like I said, from clinical to finance and everything in between.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And last but not least is Abby Weber, who's a senior recruiter at Land O'Lakes, and I believe is still involved with the hiring of professional management and executive level candidates for the Purina Animal Nutrition and Winfield Solutions teams at Land O'Lakes. And if I'm wrong on that, correct me, Abby. But is also an alumna with a bachelor's degree in communications and international business from a system campus of the U, the University of Minnesota Duluth. Go Bulldogs. Welcome, Abby.
I love it. Thanks, John. Yeah, I was really happy to be a part of this panel discussion again, and I have been with Land O'Lakes for the past 4 years, to your point, helping support our Purina Animal Nutrition and Winfield Solutions teams. And prior to that, worked with Target in talent acquisition for about 4 years as well. And prior to that, did some search recruitment for about 3 years. So really exciting opportunity to be able to talk through some of the ins and outs of recruitment, as no matter what stage you are at in your job search, I feel like navigating through the resume and search process is always difficult. So it's great to have these open conversations to talk more about them.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Abby. And I also have to say that Abby was kind of on the initial trial run of this webinar. We did a webinar kind of in the vein of this about a couple years ago, and Abby was a brave soldier to do that first one too. So really happy to have all 4 individuals here today. And we're going to really jump right into some questions. We've kind of framed up some very broad questions that I'll have the panel discuss, but as I said at the top, as there's questions that are from the audience, feel free to type those into the questions pane of GoToWebinar, and we'll try to address them as we can. So, as I talk a lot with alumni who are either in human resources or in recruiting, hear a lot of times that there's, maybe misconceptions from the job seeker side about the role of recruiters in the job search process. So, and from your experience in recruiting, are there any major misconceptions you feel that people have as far as the role of a recruiter and just how they engage in that process?
And John, is there any way you could be a little bit more specific about some of the misconceptions that you've heard, and then I'd love to address those?
I think I would say it's probably a little bit more with maybe even especially in the exploratory stage that there's how should I frame it? Like if they're contacting you, that almost like you're a service that would match them to, a particular job within a company.
Absolutely.
And granted, it's like, as we've heard everyone's introductions, sometimes you're only working on a very specific.
Yeah, and that's actually, that's a perfect segue, because oftentimes people do reach out to me, candidates who are just kind of generally interested in the company. And I have no problem with someone who's being generally interested in the company, and I'd love to help them out. However, as a recruiter, it's much better for candidates to come prepared for a specific area of the company that they are interested in, having prepared to present what their skills and their interests are, so that as a recruiter, you can help direct them into a more specific part of the company and be a lot more helpful and fruitful in that conversation to help move them forward into a particular role. So I think that's something that's really important, John, that people are prepared to have an understanding of what their interests are, what their skills are, and frankly, having kind of gone on our website and looked a little bit about some of the open jobs. So recruiters are not career advisors as much as it's kind of fun to do that sometimes. But frankly, I think recruiters just don't have the time to do that with all candidates. So it's good to come prepared by the point you're talking to a recruiter.
Any other panelists have insights from your own experiences on this topic?
So this is Elizabeth Nelson. A lot that we hear at the state is that nobody's ever looking at my resume from the state of Minnesota. So if I don't have the right keywords in, nobody's ever going to contact me. And so I often see that individuals may copy and paste our job postings at the end of their resumes when they submit them to us. That doesn't change your potential of getting an interview with us at all. All of our talent acquisition team at the state is required to individually look at each of those applications. We don't have a magic algorithm that reviews them for us. And so the best advice that I would give to a job seeker is make sure you take the time to read through that job description, meet the minimum qualifications, and then adjust your resume so that it really matches and speaks to what we're looking for and what your potential is in that job. So that's one misconception that I hear often, is that I'm submitting my resume to a black hole just for some computer to look at, and no physical person is ever reviewing that. And so I love to kind of break and demystify that process and let you know that we really are looking at it, and we're really looking to have you put your best foot forward by telling us how you match those job qualifications.
And I know one thing sometimes I've also heard is the difference, maybe this is both the corporate and nonprofit side, as far as the difference between the recruiter, but then ultimately the hiring manager. So Megan or Abby, I don't know if either of you have any thoughts on that, or if that's applicable kind of in the areas where you work as well.
Yeah, this is Megan Herrmann. I can speak to that a little bit. So as a recruiter, we are not ultimately the decision maker on the hiring decision. We are partnering with the hiring manager, and we, again, at General Mills do full cycle. I handle full cycle recruiting. So seeing the candidate from being sourced, however we get them, through new hire onboarding and starting day one. So I'm kind of partnering with the hiring manager to understand that profile that they're looking for, finding candidates that would meet that. They're assessing that talent as we move through the process, and we kind of leverage them from an interview standpoint. And ultimately, they're the ones that are going to be making the call on the candidate. So what I would encourage people to do is definitely make sure you're reviewing the job description. Like was stated earlier, we ask screening questions as a part of our application process. I would highly encourage people to fill those out, because I am sending that on to the hiring manager, who is the decision maker for the role. And usually those are pretty specific to key things that we're looking for from candidates. And so that's a great place for you to showcase strong examples of why you think your previous experience translates to that you can get in front of the decision maker right out of the gate early on. So that is what I kind of say around that, just knowing the difference that the hiring manager in our instance is the ultimate decision maker in the role. So getting information to them and putting your best foot forward, and making sure that you're submitting those screening questions and following through on the full application.
Can I add on to that, John? This is Abby. Yes, I would definitely agree with what Megan said as well. And I think keeping in mind that as we work with managers throughout the organization, we're really there to be that consultative partner. So helping them better understand and coach them on looking at their teams. What are they missing? What do they need? What type of skill sets? So it's about helping them identify what the needs are on their teams, and then showcasing how to essentially identify that within talent that we're reaching out to and that we're connecting with.
Great point. Thank you. Actually, I'm going to stay with you, Abby, kind of going into the next question to talk a little bit more about some of the best ways for job seekers to learn about roles at your organization. And I guess I'm really asking this question more from the standpoint of, from your experience, are there any kind of either maybe company-specific resources or just job searching kind of best practices in general that people either often overlook or don't take advantage of from your perspective?
Absolutely. So I think we all, when we approach that, we probably all go to the standard places. You go to the company website, you go to Indeed, you check on social media. But I think sometimes the best resources that I've seen where people have been most successful in finding out about opportunities and even just meeting other individuals at those particular companies of interest is just through personal networking. I can't tell you enough how many times we've had individuals who, I've had a chance to speak with them on the phone and ask them if they know anybody at Land O'Lakes, and they have, but they haven't actually reached out to them to explore their networks and see if they could, come on site or if they could make a personal introduction to the specific area of interest. That's probably one of the biggest ones. For me, the most obvious is first look at your personal network. Who do you know? Or, touching base with those who may have contacts within those organizations of interest. That would probably be the biggest resource that I've seen that people usually overlook.
Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts from our panel as far as things that they've observed?
Yeah, I would say the same thing. At the state, we're the largest employer in Minnesota. Between our state agencies and Minnesota state colleges and universities, there are, about 50,000 employees across the state in every single county but one. So your opportunity of having someone in your network that can help you connect with the right people within the right organization, as Abby was mentioning, is something that is often a possibility for a lot of individuals looking to work in state government and into public service. So I completely second that. And a great way to figure out who you know in your network that is working for us at the state on LinkedIn. And we have a State of Minnesota company page on LinkedIn that you can follow. Take a look at all of our members on there and see who can help open up doors and opportunities for you.
Actually, that segues into an audience question very nicely, is that one of our participants online today asked, how much of a role does LinkedIn play in a recruiter's search? I received a couple emails from recruiters who reached out to me via my LinkedIn profile. So maybe it's kind of a twofold question as far as, whether it's as an individual recruiter, as company, how much do you rely on LinkedIn, and maybe just kind of how much emphasis you put on a individual's LinkedIn profile or social media presence when evaluating him or her during the job search process. So Anne, do you have any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I would say that LinkedIn is a necessary component in today's job seeking environment. So it is crucial that you have an updated LinkedIn page, are continually updating your LinkedIn contacts, are reaching out to those people. However, it's not the end all be all. So I think that we're at this interesting flux in a lot of corporate recruiting where kind of LinkedIn has been the primary resource for reaching out to people. However, a lot of that is changing. There's a lot of new sites that are coming up. And as the other recruiters mentioned, the personal relationships cannot be overlooked in terms of the importance that they play in actually getting a role. So I think it's a must. You have to have an updated LinkedIn. Yes, recruiters do use LinkedIn. There is an application of LinkedIn called LinkedIn Recruiter, which most companies pay for. And that means that they can message you without being your firsthand contact. A lot of companies do take advantage of that. However, there seems to be kind of a LinkedIn overload where so many candidates are receiving so many LinkedIn messages that at this point they're ignoring anything from LinkedIn. So we're at an interesting crossroads. I wouldn't discard it, but I also would still depend more on your personal relationships. You can find out who you know through LinkedIn. Absolutely respond to a recruiter if they reach out to you on LinkedIn because they have personally targeted you. But keep in mind other avenues as well.
Megan, do you have any other thoughts from your experience at General Mills?
Yeah, I would say one other thing that people could definitely look at is there's definitely a lot of sites, but Glassdoor would also help give you another perspective on, if you're not sure maybe what company, you could look up companies in the area and understand more about their culture, their current state, if you're even in an earlier phase of that, as well as a lot of, we'd mentioned before, obviously looking at the company sites, but one thing most of them do is allow you to put a search in and get notifications when new jobs come up that you're interested in a specific role or function. So that's a really easy way. And and a lot of different websites beyond just the company sites have that. So that's an easy way to kind of keep a continuous pulse on what's coming up and what's out there.
Thanks so much, Megan. There's a couple questions that have come in online, and so I'm going to kind of maybe jump ahead to some of the questions on either career change or kind of maybe translating experience. And I think the questions that I'm going to try to combine together here focus a little bit more about job seekers who might have been out of the workplace for some time. It could be a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's for health reasons or family caregiving, or just maybe was a teacher for 20 years and now is trying to move into a completely different field. So from the panel's perspective, what have you seen that has been effective from like a candidate standpoint as far as people who are trying to re-enter the workforce after a significant absence? I mean, what are the kind of the challenges and opportunities with that? Well, Elizabeth, would you have any thoughts on that?
So I think the biggest thing from a recruiter's perspective is some context around it. So all I have to go off of to really understand your job information is what you provide to me. And oftentimes that's in the application process, your resume and or cover letter as well, if you're able to submit those. So being able to put some context around it for me, so I don't have to necessarily make assumptions or potentially wonder why you may have left the market. If you have a reason for that, and we understand that life circumstances are different for everyone, that is something that is, often something we can take into account and continue to consider your candidacy as long as you meet our qualifications. So that isn't something that we discount schools for or hold against them by any means. But we need to understand, again, why. There are certain things that are private and we wouldn't want to know your private information, but to completely leave large gaps with no sort of explanation, especially in a cover letter, which is a really great place to provide some context around that, I think is beneficial to a job seeker, at least from the state's perspective.
Yeah, and I definitely, this is Abby, I agree with Elizabeth 100%. Just a little bit of context is helpful. And just back to the personal network, that's when I think in those types of situations, those personal networks are key. Especially if you're looking at re-entering, going back and reaching out to some of those individuals that maybe you've worked with in the past or that were great resources that could potentially, introduce you to some different opportunities or just kind of help be a resource in guiding in that next direction. I've seen that be really successful as well. There's reaching out to a network that you've had in the past and utilizing those connections.
Yeah. It's nice to be able to have a personal advocate if you have an opportunity to do so within an organization to help you, because it can be harder for individuals who are looking for a large career move or who have gaps of employment. So having more people on your team is always going to be beneficial.
Audience question that came in. This is kind of in the vein of learning about opportunities, is that how often in your day-to-day work, and this might be applicable to some, maybe not to others, but you either work with headhunters or what would be called third-party recruiters that are maybe funneling candidates to you for hard-to-fill positions, things like that. So the question from the participant is, should I use a headhunting service or maybe try to reach out to the company representative more directly? Megan, do you have any thoughts on that from a General Mills perspective?
Yeah, so from a General Mills perspective, I would say we have tried to move away from using third-party agencies and headhunters. So I would say for us, it would be best to come directly to the General Mills recruiter, as we are the ones that are funneling in the candidates. There are some case scenarios that we might use it for very high level roles, but for the majority of our roles, we are the ones that are sourcing and finding the candidates. So it'd be best to connect with us on LinkedIn and, again, be specific around what roles you're interested in. The first thing I'll ask employees or candidates to do as well is to make sure that they've applied to the position. So if you're reaching out to someone that is a recruiter for the role, make sure you also follow up with applying to the role formally so they can review your information.
Absolutely.
I completely agree with that from a Best Buy perspective as well. We don't use too much agency either. And to be honest, there's a fee associated with using candidates through a referral through an agency. And so it is more economically responsible for us as a company to directly reach out to the company, to reach out to the candidate. So absolutely recommend reaching directly out to the recruiter. If you are having trouble, I think then the recruiter from an agency would be a second way to go. But I would say that wouldn't be your first option.
And that's the same for us at the state of Minnesota across the board, not just the Department of Human Services. We, on a very limited basis, if at all ever, try to avoid using third-party vendors for candidates, so any recruiting agencies. We have a complicated contractual process. You might know the state, we want to give organizations a fair chance to be vendors with us, so we often don't have third-party vendors on contract with us for those reasons.
Yeah, this is Abby. At Land O'Lakes, we use some vendors. It just depends on the niche of the positions. But I guess I would just say, for me, it really depends on what industry you're in. I do, I want to be mindful of the fact that I think there are some industries that are really driven by more of that search mentality. So I think it's just understanding for the industry that you're in, what kind of is the best approach. Some industries are pure, it really is just a search type of program as you look at position to position, but most industries, I think, really their talent acquisition teams are usually the best resources. So I would say just do your research on your industry and kind of, whether there's a small talent pool or a really large talent pool for what you do, just to know what the best way to approach it would be.
Awesome, thank you. We're actually getting some questions that are coming up from different participants around cover letters. And one person asked, if there are no extenuating circumstances, how important is it to provide a cover letter if it is optional? And then others talk about different recommendations as far as if they should be submitting a cover letter, especially in the context if the employer is asking them to fill out an online profile, etc. So maybe just in general, from your perspectives, what is the current, and it can vary probably from position to position, but like the current emphasis on cover letters? And maybe kick it off with Elizabeth from the state.
So the state, we recently changed our application process in the last a little over a year. And cover letters right now are something that are not required for any of our positions. And typically, there's something that we would request as a second phase of getting through our application process. But you have the option of adding a cover letter with your resume as one document and submitting it to any position. I think that it depends on the industry and the organization as to how much they weight the information in it. From my perspective and the teams that I work in, we have a highly competitive landscape for a lot of our roles. And if there are opportunities for you to speak as to why you may be a good fit, that you've done research on our organization, that you understand what we do, and that you think it's a good fit from your perspective, being able to communicate some of those things to us as an employer tends to be really beneficial. When they're optional, I say go ahead and do it, because if you can provide anything, that one glimpse that you have to get in front of a recruiter or a hiring manager, it doesn't hurt to give them more information that's going to sell yourself, as long as you're making sure it doesn't have errors or mistakes in it. That's probably one of the biggest pitfalls I see from people that do submit cover letters, is they don't take the time to make sure that it's listing the right job that they're applying for, the right organization. And that's a way to get yourself to the bottom of the list pretty quickly. So if you're going to do it, make sure you put the time into it, make sure it has the right information. And if it's optional, I would say go ahead and do it. It's not going to harm you unless you have gross errors in it.
Any other thoughts on cover letters from the panel?
I think
this is Megan.
Go ahead, Megan.
Thanks. So I would say it is optional for General Mills as well, but I think it's a good way, like I said before, to set yourself apart. Or if you're switching into a different career path, to be able to articulate why you think previous experience and skills you have translate to that new job. If you are coming off, as we had talked about earlier, a time where you might have been out of the workforce for a certain period of time. I know we mentioned before, that's another great spot to discuss and articulate kind of what happened in the gaps in your resume, just to shed some more light and to give us more information in general, I think is a good way. So those are other ways that you could use it well.
I agree with all of that. This is Anne from Best Buy. I think really it is also depending on the type of position that you are applying for. So in my works, recruiting for finance and accounting, we really don't look at cover letters. It's optional. You can definitely put one in there, but your resume should really speak for itself. If there is a role, conversely, that is a little bit more driven on written communication, et cetera, then that would be an excellent time to showcase your expertise in writing, and a cover letter would be a perfect time for that.
Yeah, it definitely can serve as a work sample.
Mm-hmm. And I would say I don't speak for the Office of Human Resources at the University of Minnesota, but from having been on different job searches before, even if the cover letter is optional, at least from the higher ed standpoint, it can help be that distinguishing factor as far as telling a little bit more about your experience, especially if you're a career changer wanting to come into higher ed, how you're connecting the dots on doing that. But then also it gives you the opportunity to kind of customize what you know about that particular hiring unit. And, and it goes back to some of the other panelists' points in the past as far as if you're, especially if you're in a job system and posting things, but then not customizing it, people catch on to that very quick, and you can kind of see who's done the cut and paste or who's forgotten to, take out the old employer's name and things like that. So just be aware of that with certain ones. We're going to jump into another kind of question, just because we do on these webinars get both students, undergrad and graduate, on the line. And so the question is, from your standpoint, as far as for those of you in those companies and organizations that do internships, let's just say, is there a different mindset that people should take when applying towards internships, or should students kind of really take that kind of the thought process that we've been talking about right now, maybe when it comes maybe more to full-time employment? Anything that you see that have been best practices on the internship search? And Megan, could you talk about that from General Mills' standpoint?
Yeah, so I would say I don't know that there's a difference from the perspective of how a candidate should be viewing the company. You should definitely be vetting them out, looking at their culture, thinking of it as a long-term fit, because our internship programs are our main pipeline to our full-time hires for entry-level roles, for the positions that we do have those for. So you definitely would want to go in with the mindset of, do I see myself with this company going forward multiple years, hoping that you would get an offer at the end of your internship to come back full-time. The difference, I think, would be in how you're looking at your resume and speaking to examples. So we do a lot of behavioral-based interview questions, and so it's tell me about a time. And so if you're coming in for an internship and maybe right out of school and you have less work experience that might be directly translating to that role, talk to some leadership experiences that you've had in extracurriculars or on campus. That's what we kind of use as a replacement if you don't have that work experience that a more experienced candidate might have. So definitely look at that, understand those examples, and kind of think through in that way. So that's what I'd say would be a difference that you could think about if you are looking for an internship or a full-time employment right off of campus. Just a tip to really lean into those leadership examples.
Yeah, this is Abby. I would say as well, as you're looking maybe at internships or different programs with companies, to really utilize your campuses or your schools partnerships or relationships that they have. A lot of the times, depending on the area that you're studying, most colleges will have relationships with several organizations. And so just making sure that you're working with your career counselors, with your professors to identify, and maybe asking, which ones would you recommend? Do you know of any, specifically given my interest for the future, and this is what I want to do, that I need or should be looking into? And I think really utilizing those school organizations, different clubs, obviously career fairs that are on campuses, that will give you a great opportunity to interact one-on-one with potential employers.
I would say from a Best Buy perspective, one of the core differences, and I think this is probably across the board, is just the timing. So internships, for example, our summer internships, our core internship is for people in college between their junior and senior year. They would be applying that fall in September for a summer spot, so quite a bit in advance. We also have a summer associate program, which is just a little bit different than our core internship. And similarly, it's ahead of time, but probably around the January and February timeline for applying for that summer internship. Versus our full-time positions, when the job is posted, there's pretty much an availability right then. And so the process would happen a lot more quickly. I do get reached out to by a number of students who are interested in doing an internship. It's March and they're looking for a summer internship. And I have to say, I'm so sorry. This was already done and decided at the beginning of the school year. So as you're a student looking, make sure that first thing in the fall, if you're interested in that you are applying and connecting with your career center and applying for those internship positions.
And I would say, this is Elizabeth from the state of Minnesota. One thing that I see differently in terms of the interview process is how you kind of answer, what do you see as your short-term and long-term goals, and how does it fit into this position that you're applying for? In an internship, again, my perspective, in an internship interview, like Megan was saying with General Mills, internships are our feeder pool. So I want to hear that you want to grow with us, that you're looking for, a position with us after your internship ends. So those are things that are going to sell yourself. In a full-time employment search, I want to hear that the position you're applying for is a really good fit for you and that you're really committed to doing that role. One potential turnoff to some of my hiring managers often is that you really want this role to get your foot in the door because within the year you want something else. And while that can be your motivation, and I encourage people to look for growth opportunities, lateral or moving up the career ladder as well, you really need to sell yourself on why you want the position you're interviewing for, and make them believe that you're the perfect person to do that job. So keep that in mind. Internships talk about how you want to grow and continue to advance with the organization if that is your career potential and that's what you'd like to do. But in a full-time employment search, make sure you're really focusing at the job on hand. It's okay to talk about that you see yourself here for the next 5 years and continue to learn and grow. But don't talk yourself into them having concerns of how long are you going to stay in your current position.
And I think kind of to Anne's point about students starting the process early, that's where I've seen, especially for maybe undergrad students who are very proactive, making sure that if you have an opportunity in freshman or sophomore years to go to career fairs and just start building that network of maybe potential companies that you want to internship for junior year, even though they wouldn't be hiring you for an internship, freshman year, or maybe even sophomore year, just taking advantage of those opportunities to educate yourself, kind of shaking off or, getting experience doing career fairs and giving your elevator pitch and things like that. That can be really helpful to students as well.
And John, I know here at the U of M on campus, the career centers have a lot of great resources. So something that our agency participates in are mock interviews, and that can be a great way. I met with a candidate who actually went on to get an internship with General Mills, and he came in, brought his job description, his resume. We ran through questions, and lo and behold, but practicing and getting ready to put his best foot forward, he was able to secure that. So take advantage of those resources on campus while you have them, because they can be a huge asset in your job search, either whether it's internship or full-time employment.
Absolutely. We have one question that came in from an audience member. It's kind of unrelated to some of the draft questions we've kind of kicked around, but the person is asking, do you have any tips or suggestions for those looking to relocate and find a new job, especially if we don't have an established network in that new city? And I don't know how many, maybe from the corporations, how many of them are, maybe recruiting for national type positions. But for those people who are maybe looking at the job search from a relocation standpoint, any, I guess, best practices that you've seen from candidates who are kind of approaching the job search from that process? And Abby, I don't know if you deal much with that at Land O'Lakes. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, we do quite a bit of relocation actually. I would say you would approach it pretty similarly, where you'd want to reach out to networks on LinkedIn. I think also cover letters could become important in that as well, just showcasing that or speaking to the fact that no, I'm not located in that state, but this is why I'm looking to make a move or why I'm interested in the area. I think giving some context around why or what the desire is to move to that region is always helpful. You don't always need that. I feel like if you have the background and the skill set to do the position, given most of our roles are really open to relocation, for the right person, that's not a deal breaker for me. I absolutely, we'll talk through specifics. I think just be prepared during that conversation to be able to speak to why you are interested in the region, why you are interested in the company, because that'll kind of help set you apart from other candidates as well as just being able to speak to it. So just be prepared.
Awesome. Well, we have about 15 minutes left, so I'm going to touch on this next slide and then go back to some of the questions. But there's a lot of literature on soft skills nowadays, and actually Abby and I were trading some emails on this question before about soft skills. So from a recruiter standpoint, what are some broad qualities you look for in candidates that go beyond concrete job duties? And Abby, if you'd be willing to tackle that one first, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely. So some of the key things that I look for in regards to soft skills, obviously strong communication. You don't need to be that overly bubbly, outgoing individual. I think there's a common misconception that strong communication means very outgoing, and it doesn't. I think just very professional and being able to be precise with what you're explaining and how you're approaching questions. Being able to be really adaptable. Creativity is another soft skill that we look for. But I feel like collaboration is probably the biggest one. We want individuals that like to work, that know how to partner effectively to make decisions and get things done. So that collaboration piece and the communication are probably the biggest. But it's not just about telling me that, hey, I have great communication skills. Maybe you put that in your resume. I want to see if you can be more specific and give me an example of why you feel like you have great communication skills, or give me an example of a project where you drove a presentation which resulted in some sort of positive business impact. So it needs to go beyond just the canned great communication skills statement. I really want to see more specifics.
Mm-hmm.
I think I can add on to that. I agree. Communication skills and showing examples of your collaboration are going to be really key. I think something that most recruiters would probably agree with is the STAR method when thinking about how to work through your experience. And so the STAR method is S for situation. Set up a context of what the situation was in which you found yourself dealing with a manager or business problem. And then the T is for task. So what was necessary in order to accomplish that? A is for activity. It's what you did, and this is really where to spend your time. It's how your action made an impact on the current situation at hand. And then R is for result. What ended up happening? How did you increase sales? How did a relationship improve? So you want to be concise, specific, positive. People don't have all day to hear about. I think interviewers have short attention spans, and you want to stand out make the maximum impact in the shortest amount of time with what you're saying. So in addition to showcasing your knowledge, skills, and abilities, which is what the STAR method would help to do, I think at Best Buy, we're in a great transformation phase of our company. And so we're really looking for people that fit our culture and values. And some of those things are going to be people that are innovative, entrepreneurial, inclusive, collaborative, as Abby mentioned, and also examples of cross-functional experience and working together. Someone who's humble, who's willing to take risks. Those are all things that are built into our key values as a company that really do strategically fit with the direction that we're moving as a business.
All great advice.
Yeah, I would say that building on what Anne said, you take a look at an organization's values, because that speaks to a lot of the soft skills that they're looking for in individuals beyond the technical knowledge and abilities that you might have. So for us at the state of Minnesota, it's a passion for public service. It's business ethics and integrity. It's accountability. We're accountable to the individuals here in Minnesota and our public and the communities in which we serve. It's a passion for inclusion. The state is continuing to diversify, and those are our customers at the end of the day. You all who are on this webinar most likely, and so we need to make sure that not only is our work culture inclusive, but our programs, the policies that we're pushing through to the legislature, all of that is really meeting the needs of the communities we're serving. And then again, attention to detail is always something that's important for a lot of jobs and things that'll come across when you're applying. So make sure that you give one look over and that when you have attention to detail on your resume, it actually is reflected and you don't have mistakes on there.
True. One question that's popped up here, and I think this could probably be during the, maybe the application process, or maybe even post after an interview, is that one of the online attendees was asking about, interested in hearing a recruiter's opinion on the follow-up emails or phone calls after applying to a job or internship. Some say it shows interest. Some say it's just annoying. What's your opinion? Anne, what do you think?
Yeah, I've as a recruiter, I've felt both ways from follow-up emails. I think that it can be a little aggressive. It can be a little annoying when it's too quickly after the application. So if you've applied the same day and you sent an email, I think that impact is going to be lost on the recruiter because they're simply trying to go through the candidates in the application. However, waiting too long, I would say too long might be 3 weeks because the process might be already in motion. So I would think a good timeline would maybe be 4 to 5 days after you apply to absolutely go ahead and reach out to the recruiter directly and say, I know I applied, you may have received my application. I'm really, really interested in this. Show your enthusiasm and excitement, because that's something that unless you have that in your cover letter, they can't see that on your resume. So I think absolutely follow up. Don't do it right away. That may be perceived as a little pushy.
And I would say from a standpoint of following an interview, I think the phone call would seem pushy at that point, but a nice email following up saying, I enjoyed meeting everyone today. Again, reiterating that you're excited, learning more about the role, made you even more interested about the company and the role is a nice follow-up. I find that shows interest, and I'll usually forward that on to the hiring team. But a phone call would be, I feel like, a little too much, but an email would be nice.
I agree with that too. And an email after an interview the same day is absolutely appropriate.
Yeah, I would agree too. I would just say with follow-up emails, how many you're sending too sometimes can get a little aggressive. So one is enough. Sometimes I'm sure those of us on the panel can definitely sympathize, but sometimes there can be 5 emails, so sticking to one is perfectly appropriate.
Yeah, and this is Elizabeth from the state. We have a contact list on every single one of our job postings for all postings across the state of Minnesota agencies. So that individual is there for you to follow up with if you don't hear anything in a reasonable amount of time. So like Anne was saying, I recommend, 4 or 5 days a week. And if you don't hear anything right away, that doesn't always mean bad news. It means that, we're busy and we're moving through the process, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. From my years of recruiting, I had come across a YouTube video probably a good 6, 7, 8 years ago now that says, don't stalk your recruiter. So if you want to Google that on YouTube, it's a quite funny video for those of us in the industry, but it talks a little bit about how we feel sometimes when we get a barrage of emails and phone calls too quickly and you haven't given enough time to make a decision, and what impact that might have on your recruiter or hiring manager. So it's a funny video, not too serious.
Well, we're kind of wrapping up here, so I think I'll just do one more kind of circle around the panel here as far as, we'll start off with you, Megan, at General Mills. Any final thoughts or any kind of best practices from your perspective that maybe we didn't have a chance to cover and you'd like to convey today?
So I think one thing is to definitely do your research on the company. I encourage candidates to think about it from the perspective of they're interviewing us just as much as we're interviewing them. So we want to make sure it's a good fit both ways. So do your research ahead of time, look on Glassdoor, talk to your personal network, understand more about that culture that you're heading into. And then as you're walking around in your interviews, pay attention to who you're seeing in the hallways, pay attention to just as you're walking through and going through interviews, just people that you're interacting with. And then making sure that you have questions for the interviewers to understand more about what was your experience like? Tell me about your career path. I think it's discouraging for interviewers when we come into a decision meeting and they're like, they had no questions for me. So think of something to ask them, even if it's the same question for each interviewer, and hearing their different perspectives around what they value most about the company. So.
Awesome. Abby, what about you at Land O'Lakes?
Yeah, I would just piggyback off of that and say definitely do your research on companies. Make sure that you feel a personal connection to the mission, to the values, and try and stay away from the canned or blanketed statements or questions. The more personal you can make it to yourself and connect it back to you, those companies' missions or values, that's really where we've seen a lot of success with people just naturally connecting with each other. Make it personal, and don't be afraid to showcase your personality a little bit during the process. And then, John, I was going to ask you as well, are we, I guess I'll just throw it out there, if there are additional questions, or if anybody wants, anybody's thinking about anything else, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn too, and I'd be happy to continue conversations and be a resource.
Thank you.
I'd echo that. This is Megan.
Thank you so much for that. And final thoughts from BestBuy.
Yeah, I will get on that train of doing your research on the company, because from a recruiter's perspective, it can be both a huge turn on when you know what you're talking about in terms of the company, and it can also be a really huge turn off. And so, speaking from experience at BestBuy, it's a big turn off when people come into interview and say, "Oh, I've heard you guys have had a little bit of a rocky past." And I'm thinking, wow, that was 2012. In 2013, our stock tripled. We have really been doing phenomenally as a company since then. And it makes you feel like the candidate has no clue, and why would we be interested in bringing them on to help our business when they haven't done the research? Mm-hmm. So I think that's a great opportunity. Also, I would just say, use your energy to your advantage. I think it was either Abby or Megan's point. You don't need to be overly bubbly in an interview. Mm-hmm. But I think whether it's a phone screen or an in-person interview, show your energy, show your interest in the role, because someone that is, doesn't sound interested, the recruiter isn't going to, really suggest to the hiring manager that they move forward with that person.
Thank you so much, Anne. And last but not least, Elizabeth, what's your final thoughts?
Yeah, so I encourage you to connect with me on LinkedIn as well, to keep in touch, and I'm happy to be a resource to anyone who's looking for careers at the state of Minnesota, and more particularly with the Department of Human Services as well. I would say that, you are your best advocate in your job search. You know your background, your skills, your knowledge and abilities better than anyone else does. So take time to do some of that, that kind of soul searching, and look at your resume and make sure you know that forward and backwards, and be prepared to use the STAR technique, as Anne mentioned, and being able to describe specific examples of what you've done. Really find ways to quantify the work that you've done, the impact that you've had within an organization, because that's what's meaningful to us. We want to know what have you done in the past, how successful has that been, and how can we leverage your skills to help us move forward as the state of Minnesota and being the best that we can be in the work that we do. So again, really take the time to know yourself, use your contacts, do mock interviews. Even if you're an experienced professional, it can feel weird to talk about yourself for extended period of time over and over again. Whether it's me or someone else, I say go ahead and do it.
Well, we're at 60 minutes on the nose, and I really want to thank our 4 panelists today, Anne, Elizabeth, Megan, and Abby, for sharing both their time and talents with us in the audience today. Really appreciate it. And we have 3 more webinars coming up between now and the end of May. Again, you can find those at umnalumni.org/virtual. And in closing, again, this webinar series is made possible in part by our alumni and friends of the Alumni Association. And if you'd like to be part of our global community, just visit us at umnalumni.org/membership. That's the conclusion of today's webinar. I hope everyone has a great day. Thank you for tuning in, and go Gophers.
Thanks, John.